What is happening to Intel? From frequent crashes and instability issues to manufacturing defects, Team Blue is in some pretty deep shit. Their stocks have seen the worst trading days in 50 years. So what exactly is happening? Let's find out. People were surprised when the new Intel Core i9 chips suddenly started crashing without any clear cause, as modern CPUs are generally quite reliable. The surprise grew into frustration when they found out online that there had been a lot of dissatisfaction with the instability issues of Intel's 13th and 14th generation Core i9, i7 and even some lower tier processors. The problem has become so severe that motherboard manufacturers had to push out BIOS updates to try and address the issue. But who is at fault here? Well, the whole thing is pretty complicated and it goes way back to the competition between motherboard manufacturers. If we take a step back, you'll find that there is not much in terms of performance between motherboards these days. So manufacturers instead choose to focus on things like an increased feature set for a particular motherboard. Still, they will not try to one-up their competitors by providing a marginally faster product. This is where the problem begins. Intel instructs motherboard manufacturers not to enable CPU overclocking out of the box, because when you boot up your system for the very first time, you want it to be running at stock and be as stable as possible. Motherboard manufacturers didn't properly follow these instructions. They disabled the thermal and power protection mechanisms of their motherboards from the factory to allow the processors to run at higher frequencies to gain an edge over their competitors. When this happens for an extended period of time under heavy load, like using Cinebench, playing heavy games, or running decompression softwares, these instabilities pop up and lead to frequent crashes. The high-end chips were hit even harder as their higher temperatures and voltages caused even greater instabilities, even leading to chip degradation in some cases. After the news broke and people all over the world started experiencing these unexplained crashes, some motherboard manufacturers started pushing out BIOS updates that they termed as Intel Baseline, which despite their name aren't the recommended settings from Intel. Some manufacturers like Asus just started pumping more voltages into the CPUs in an effort to stabilize them. While this option worked out for many, it has the added downside that it degraded the chips much faster, and once that happened, more voltage would be needed to stabilize the chips, and you see where this is going. Intel too shares some of the blame here. One of the main reasons why motherboard manufacturers felt comfortable tweaking the overclocking settings, and while later BIOS updates did nothing to fix these issues, was that Intel's guidance regarding proper voltages to the manufacturers is quite vague. On another front, Intel identified a bug in a feature called ETVB, where the microcode algorithm caused improper voltage requests to the processor. This affected all 13th and 14th gen processors that were rated at 65 watts or higher. This microcode algorithm is an important CPU firmware that defines parameters like how much voltage the CPU receives from the motherboard, and this is where the problem lies, due to the voltage specifications being too high. Intel has stated that these over voltages to the CPU can happen both while under load or at idle. Tech expert and YouTuber Derbauer has done a material analysis with an electron microscope to analyze the implications this might have on your CPU. It's an interesting video. I'll leave the link in the description below. You should check it out. If you are getting frequent system crashes, application crashes, or blue screens, your system might be affected with this. A typical error message for this issue in Windows looks like this. The error message points to an issue with your graphics card, but actually it's the CPU that's causing this issue due to the faulty microcode algorithm. The kind of silver lining in all of this is that Intel has now released recommendations for the correct settings to be applied to mitigate these instability issues. And as of now, most motherboard manufacturers have started pushing out BIOS updates, which include these updates and a microcode patch for 600 and 700 series chipset motherboards. The fix for the root cause of the issues, however, isn't coming until the middle of August. If you are facing similar issues, you should go update your motherboard BIOS like right now. These updates should keep you afloat for the time being. If, however, you are still facing these issues after a BIOS update, try manually lowering your CPU clock speed by 300 MHz, or go to the BIOS and turn down your CPU multiplier. This should hopefully solve your issue for now. The bottom line is, if you own a 13th or 14th generation processor with a TDP of 65 watts or higher, your CPU has already been functioning with this faulty microcode. Depending on how heavily your CPU has been used during this period of time, the cores might have been damaged so much that the processor might not even last through the warranty period. The August microcode patch will only do some damage limitation and will not fix your issue if your CPU is already crashing. In this case, we suggest you contact Intel customer support to file a claim and insist on a replacement. There is another caveat in all of this. Intel has stated that the origins of this problem could be traced back to a manufacturing defect in early 2023, which involved the oxidation of some of the early 13th gen processors. If you are one of them, the upcoming microcode patch will not fix your issues, as there is a physical problem with your chip. In this case, you should contact Intel customer support to get this resolved immediately. Luckily, Intel has increased the warranty for these processors to 5 years. I guess the the takeaway from all of this is that Intel has to start keeping a closer eye on how motherboard manufacturers are building and configuring their products out of the factory. It's not an easy task, but they're gonna have to do it anyway, because another hit like this to Team Blue's reputation is not going to be pretty. So what are your experiences with all of this? Have you faced any issues with your CPUs? Let us know in the comments down below. Leave a like and subscribe to TechNiche if you want to see more content like this.